awful lot of times, but it did happen quite a few times that I would get up and do all the chores and make the biscuits, and the rest of them would get up. I just like to milk cows, I guess, or pulling tits, whatever you want to call it.
You're telling the goody two-shoes part. What about, you said you were the worst child, or you got beaten more than anybody else? Let's hear the bad part.
These was, Beverly's reminding me of some of the other things that happened. The big thing that, and it started back when I was about 14, 15 years old. I like cigarettes. And if my dad caught me with cigarettes, or my mother, or my kids, my brothers or sisters would squeal at me, I would really catch heck. And I don't mean just maybe, I mean I really caught heck. They'd take the car away from her. They would make me stay home. That was before I could drive a car. They'd keep me in, and I couldn't go any place. I couldn't go to the games or anything. And then after I got big enough to drive the car, they'd take the car away from me. That didn't make any difference because I'd always walk to where I wanted to go. And when I was, the thing that really, I played sports, basketball most of the time. I did play football in my senior year in high school, and we played 7 different area schools, which nowadays we're not even in their league. Back then they were all Class D schools, in which we was. And I can remember one game, and it really made me mad, that we played Kelloggville, just this side of Kellogg's, just this side of Grand Rapids, and we was playing football, and I was making more plays than anybody else, and the guy got me mistaken for Hugh Taylor, and he was on a loudspeaker that was coming over. He kept saying, Hugh Taylor did this, and Hugh Taylor did that, and it wasn't Hugh at all, it was me, and it got me mad. Anyhow, in our senior year in basketball, we went to the state finals. We passed the quarterfinals, was in the semifinals. When we got, I think, the third night out. We played one game, we beat them. We played another game, we beat that, and I couldn't tell you who the teams were. And we had to buy it between the first and the second night we played. And the next night we played 2 nights in a row, and the team that we played was just a lot better ball players than we was, and they beat us. But that was about as close as we ever got to winning in sports while I was in school. I played a guard most of the time in basketball. Once in a while I was switched to forward, but most of the time I played guard. And I had heard a little story about, or I had seen this picture about my wife when she was talking, and there she was talking about putting up ice in the wintertime, and we did the same thing. Only we had our own ice shanty at the farm. It was filled with sawdust, and we kept enough ice to our, we had an ice box in the house, so everything was refrigerated with ice. It wasn't refrigerators that you have nowadays, but we did have an ice chest, and we did go down and saw our own ice out, and we'd haul it up and put it in this building that we had there, and we had our own ice all summer long. And it's a good thing she reminded me of it, rather than forgotten it. But that's, and we always used a crosscut saw, and I was always the guy down at the bottom in the water on the other end of the saw. Well then, we had, the biggest thing I can remember with my brothers, and this is not funny, but it was and it wasn't back then. We had nothing to do, no entertainment. In the summertime, we would go out and grab our shotgun or 22 rifle and go out and shoot crows or anything we could shoot. And then in the fall year and the wintertime, there was nothing to do. And I can remember 5 or 6 Sundays that we'd chase each other around the barn with a black snake whip. And that thing really hurt when you got hit with it. And then my one brother and my 2 brothers got in a fight, Everett and Edward. And Everett swung a baseball bat and hit Edward in the mouth, and we had to end up taking him to Dr. Larson and Whalen. And Dr. Larson and Whalen would not wait on him or do anything until the next day. So finally we took him to Plano to a dentist down there, and he straightened his teeth out, and he still has them today. But they lay him right back in his mouth. And I think it was intentional, because once in a while Everett would get mad. And we'd have our fights. but I always got along good with most everybody. I had a couple of sisters that they thought I was a little stinker, and they thought that would get my way more than I should, but I don't believe that. I was just a nice kid. I did get a lot of spankings for smoking, and that was about the most I ever heard.
How about this about you falling out of a barn and breaking your arm? What did you do there?
I broke my ribs.
What was that?
But weren't you in trouble when you were doing that or something?
No,
Doing something you wasn't supposed to?
No, we shouldn't have been up in the barn.
Oh.
And when Mother came home, or this goes back to when we was down at Byron Center yet. We was up in the barn playing, and my folks told us never to go up in the barn to play because we might fall and hurt ourselves. We heard the folks come home, and when I went to come down out of the hay mow, and when I did that, I fell all the way down to the bottom, and I caught my stomach on a 2x4 that was down below, and I broke 2 ribs, and my folks never realized it. And even to this day, they stick out a lot further than anybody else's. But this goes back in the days we was at Byron Center, so I had to be, I'd say, around 8 or 9 years old.
You ever break anything else?
No, that's all I broke. As far as I know, that's all I broke is my rib. But the way I caught the 2x4, it caught it underneath here and broke them out this way instead of breaking them in that way. So these have always been sticking out farther than they should have been.
How'd you get along with your parents?
I got along good with Dad. Mother was, usually after me for something or other. But I still worked, I think, as hard or harder than the rest of the kids. I never shunned my duty on work. I mean, I was always there when work had to be done. And when I started working for my father, putting on roofs, I think I probably set a record in the amount of squares that we put on. I know we did. We had 3,000 in a crew, and there was no day that we ever put on 36 squares, and we put on 36 squares with 3 guys. And that's never was done, even when Dad had his crew way back when. They just never did it. But,
do you have any pets? Any pets?
Any what?
Dogs.
Dogs, cats?
Oh, we always had dogs out on the farm. We did have hunting dogs. We had the best hunting farm there was. We had rabbits running all over every place. We had, my cousins came out of our Grand Rapids, the Brickers, and they usually bring some friends with them. And we had a couple of hound dogs, and we would go out and go rabbit hunting. And we have, I think, 22 rabbits is the most we got in one day, and this is on a Sunday. And you could go out the next day and you could get 22 more. And we had the sisters that was down at Byron Center came up to visit us on the farm, and they loved rabbit. And so I can remember I took the gun, went out west of the house, and I was gone about 20 minutes, and I came back with 5 rabbits. There was just that many rabbits there. But there was so much underbrush and everything that they really produced. But then after we had a lot of cattle and stuff, they started trimming out the underbrush, and the swamp holes was cleaned up, and we just didn't have the rabbits that we had. Now I don't think you can find a rabbit on the farm. They're just gone. But we had rabbits that was 3 times the size of a regular wild rabbit. What we did, and they say it doesn't happen. Oh, I go back to another thing. Down at Byron Center, we used to raise rabbits, and we had probably about 300 to 400 at one time. And when we left Byron Center, we took a lot of the rabbits with us, and we had them out in the farm. Well, we had too many chores to do, and we couldn't take care of the rabbits. So we just ended up turning them loose. Well, I say that a tame rabbit and a wild rabbit want to interbreed. Well, we had wild rabbits that was 3 times as big as any wild rabbits I've ever seen. And they really, I think they did interbreed, and we had rabbits, as I say, all over the place. And we had pheasants, we had squirrel, and we could never wait for the first day of hunting season, which was always October 15th, and you just naturally took the day off and went hunting. And we'd get out there, squirrel hunting was the first thing that we did. We'd get out there, and it was so blasted cold in the morning. By the time the sun came up and the squirrels came up, you was froze to death, and you had to move, and then you scared the squirrels away. But we did get our share of all the game that was around that area. And we had horses out there that we could ride. Uh, we had a lot of fun as kids. There again, it goes back to what my wife was telling about. And we did have one bicycle for the 6 of us kids. And we paid $5 for it at the time we bought it, and we did have to take turns riding it. And but back then you learned how to share. Maybe you had to fight to share, but at least you learned how to share with your brothers and sisters. Because you didn't have 2 bicycles, or like in most cases now, every kid's got a bicycle in a family, which I guess it's keeping up with the Joneses. But back then, you were just lucky to have anything. And as far as Christmas, if you got a pair of pants or maybe a shirt, you were real lucky. Or in one case, I got a pair of gloves and a scarf, and I thought I had the world by the tail, because nobody got much for Christmas. If it did, it was mostly handmade. You just didn't go out and buy things. And I think with Dad going back into the roofing business, we did start to have a little bit more money. And we did get a few things maybe that some of the other kids didn't have. But because Dad did a good job in roofing.
When did you move into this house?
When did we what?
Move to this place? After you're out of high school?
No, we stayed on the farm until... we stayed on the farm. Well, in the meantime, after I was in school, in my junior year in high school, I met a girl there by the name of Pauline Weber. And I did take her home from school a few nights, but I couldn't drive her up to the door because her mother didn't want her to ride with anybody. And I kept hounding her for a date, and I hate to say this, but I think that she knows that I'm not sure, that I bet with some kids in school that I could get a date with Pauline Weber. And they says, no way, because they had all tried and they just could not do it. Well, me being a Catholic and her being a Catholic, I thought I stood a better chance than some of the other guys did. So I took her home a few times, not all the way home. And I kept asking her for a date, and I can remember we used to meet out to Crothers Lake in the summertime to go swimming. She'd get done out there about the same time I did, and we'd swim together. And I'd walk her back home, and not all the way home, just part way home, because I didn't dare walk her all the way home because her mother wouldn't like that. And then this was just before the junior prom. She said that she could go out with me at that time. And we did go to the junior prom together, and I don't remember where our junior senior prom was. But I'm almost sure that year we had it in high school. And then the following year we had a senior prom, and that was held at Chesamee's, just this side of Grand Rapids. And we had a big, matter of fact, I think that was the nicest place I'd ever been into, and I had Pauline with me then, and we made quite a night out of it, and we were going to stay out until daybreak. I think we almost made it, but we chickened out, and I guess we brought her home right at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and that was the end of the senior prom. But then we did have our senior trip that year. We was the first class to go to Washington, D.C. I was with Pauline most of the time. We were together. We spent a week going down there on a bus. We stopped at different places on the way going down. After we got down there, the places that we did stop was no fancy motels. It was either a barracks or something like that we could get into for almost nothing. And when we got down to Washington, D.C., we were still sleeping in barracks. And the thing that I can remember most about Washington, D.C. was that we took an airplane ride up over the Capitol and seen how the streets and all the lights and everything was. We did that at night. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing I ever did.
My birthday.
Well, that was for her birthday, and she footed the bill.
That's pretty good.
I ran out of money.
Do you guys have class officers and that type of thing?
Yeah.
Were you any of those?
I really don't believe I was. I wasn't valedictorian or salutatorian, but I know that I got a wife that was a salutatorian. She wouldn't admit it, but she was. And I graduated. There was 23 in our class, and I must have graduated about 12th or 13th from the bottom or the top, whichever way you want to count. I don't know. Can you think of anything, Polly?
No. You guys want to go on?
Well, it's kind of jumbled up. I mean, we jump forward and we jump backwards, but I think you can put it all together, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go on to Polly and you together.
Aren't we paid now? Yeah.
What do you think, Beth?
Let's do it.
Okay, this is the start of Pauline and Carl Levett. You've already had our...
Well, you've heard Polly's side of the story, and you've heard my side of the story. Now we have a story of us being together. We got to the point where we just started dating each other in high school. We went to the senior prom together, and then came summer vacation. No, we had the trip into Washington, D.C. And after that came summer vacation, and during that summer, we dated off and on. Most of the time it was on Sulphur Lake, where we both met those women in the evening after work was done. And then we'd managed to go to a movie, and we'd try to stop someplace afterwards and get something to eat. But our movie was a dime, and our milkshake was a nickel, so that took 15 cents. Some of the two of us doing it, that was 30 cents. And sometimes we didn't have enough money to do both, to eat and to have or go to a movie both. But then I started working for my father, putting on roofs, and I was getting a little extra money in then. And he would pay me at the end of each week. And then we did have a little bit more money to go dating on. We went with our folks, I think into Kalamazoo someplace. I'm not really sure where we went with my folks one evening. And on the way coming back, in the back seat of the car, Polly and I was sitting in the back seat of the car, and I proposed and asked her to marry me, and she said she would. And then we set the date, and that following summer, May 22nd, 1940, we got married. We got married in the Catholic Church over to Allegan. We did go to Watson Catholic Church, but it was a mission church, and then they didn't have the weddings there, so we had to go to Allegan Catholic Church to get married. After the church, or after the wedding, we went over to some restaurant in Allegan. We had a wedding breakfast with all my brothers and sisters, and her brothers and sisters, and a few friends, and that was about it. And after the wedding breakfast, we went into Detroit. My brother drove, and Dorothy, that's her sister, was along with us. So there was four of us that went on a honeymoon over to Detroit. Polly can tell you a little bit something about our wedding dress. I don't know too much about dresses.
Well, just a straight length dress, all white, one piece. I guess I wore a hat. I can't remember that even now, but they said we had to wear hats in church at that time. And it was made out of what at that time they called shark skin material. It was a heavy, glossy look to it. And I wore it for different occasions after that once in a while, and I saved it for years, but I can't remember whatever happened to it. It probably burned up. And then the house fire, which comes a lot later. But when after we got back from the honeymoon, we had a house we fixed up, a tenant house on his folks' farm. And we had wood and coal. Carl says we have a bathroom, had a bathroom, but I can't remember it. But we furnished it with my inheritance.
It was her dowry in order for her to marry me.
So each of us kids had, about $500?
$300.
$300 coming. We could either have it when we got married or when Mom thought we needed it most. So we furnished the whole house with my $300. That's what we started out on.
And that was the beds, the rugs, the furniture. That was a complete thing. We furnished the whole house on $300. Matter of fact, I don't know about the stove and refrigerator, but that probably went with it.
Okay, tell me about kissing him? He said he asked for the first kiss?
Right.
So?
Came to the door of the old farmhouse down where we lived. That was when we were still living down south of Swan School. And we had a screened-in front porch, and he walked me to the door, and he asked me if he could kiss me. And I said, yes, I guess so, and so he did.
Well, was he a good kisser?
Oh, yes. Very nice. Real practiced.
Was he?
Right.
Was he your first?
Right.
Dad?
No, I had kissed other girls.
Had you?
Lots of them, let's put it that way. Oh.
So how long did you date before you got around to doing it?
Our first child came 8.5 months after we were married.
Dad.
We think that he was premature, but we wasn't sure.
Uh-huh. You're avoiding my question.
Beverly would like to know about our sex life before marriage.
Well, you better tell her.
Well, we did have a premature child that came about 8.5 months after we were married. So if I had played around a little bit before we got married, it was just by accident. Anyhow, living on a farm next to my folks wasn't that easy, although it was nice because we did get our milk, we got our meat, and we got our potatoes, and we got a lot of stuff to eat. And at the end of the week, we'd take $5 that I'd earned, and we'd go in town and we'd buy all the groceries and always have enough left for a movie, and usually go to DeHaven's down to Plano, have a, back then they called it a frosted milkshake.
Frosted Malden.
Frosted Malden. And that would use up the $5 that for the week. But then we were saving a little bit. And see, after a year, well, then not much happened except work. Then a year after we were married, we decided to take a honeymoon over to Niagara Falls. So we had my mother take care of Gary, which was our first child. And we took off for Niagara Falls. We left in the morning. We got over to Niagara Falls in the afternoon. We seen the falls. We got a motel. And about that time, Pauline decided that she had to go home to her baby. So we turned around and we went back home that same night. So we had our honeymoon from morning until night.
Mom, how was your first pregnancy and that type of thing?
I never knew when I was pregnant. His mother had to tell me. I would get sick and pass out. One time I passed right out. No, I didn't know what was happening. And she said, well, you could be pregnant. And I said, well, what's that? I didn't even know, because these are things we never talked about at home. You never mentioned that word at our house, you know. And so I didn't know what was happening. And then she told me that I was going to have a baby. And that's how I found out. And but she taught me everything I knew about cooking or keeping house, because I always worked in the fields to home. So I didn't know how to bake or anything, so all my cooking came from his mother. She taught me everything I knew.
Where'd you deliver?
At Pip. Oh, well, it wasn't Pip then. What's it called? It was the Plano Hospital. Well, what was it called at that time? It wasn't called Pip, anyhow. It was the old hospital in Plano. And when Gary was born, he and I had measles in the hospital. And when they found those, there wasn't a nurse come near us, and we got an ambulance and shipped us home right away. But back then, they made you stay in bed 10 days, at least maybe 2 weeks. After you had a baby, you just didn't get up and stir around or nothing. And of course, with us both having measles, they were afraid of his eyes and this and that, so they kept us in the dark, and I was in the dark for 10 days, couldn't get out where any sunlight shone or anything, and his mother was a real stickler for that.
I can also remember we had Dr. Vaughn for a doctor, and from the start of her being pregnant until after the baby was born, our total doctor bill was $50. I mean, and that took care of her, I would say, probably a couple months after the baby was born. And hospital bill, I think, was $23 or $24 is all we paid to have a baby. So for less than $75, doctor and hospital, we had the baby delivered, and I'm sure you can't do that today.
Did you get pregnant for Greg when you were having that honeymoon?
couldn't if we didn't stay overnight.
Oh.
No.
That was in May. Greg was born when?
April. No, we worked out. Must not,
She
not have
she,
been.
she had to have been pregnant when we was on our second honeymoon. Well, really on our first honeymoon. When we went to Detroit, it was just over something to eat, a movie, and back home. So that really wasn't a honeymoon. We didn't stay overnight. So when we did go to Niagara Falls, she had to be pregnant already for Greg then.
And then my mother died that year, and we never had gotten a chance to tell her I was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
She died in.
But she did
it
see
was
Gary,
about 3 months.
the first one. And then I did make a mistake. I hung my pants on the end of the bed, and that's when she got pregnant for Greg. And every time I'd hang my pants on the end of the bed, she got pregnant again. So I don't hang my pants on the end of the bed anymore. After we had Greg, well, then we...
Where did we moved to first from there? We bought that house in Otsego. From the farm, we went to a house in Otsego.
No, we didn't. From working on the farm, it was just about the start of the war, and we couldn't get metal to roof with or anything, so I got a job at Wolverine Upholstering Company in Grand Rapids, so we moved to Grand Rapids on Scribner Avenue. And I only worked 3 days a week at Wolverine Upholstering Company, and so then I got a job, part-time job out to Pet Milk Company in Wayland that I could work nights at. So then I was holding down 2 jobs in order to keep things going. And we stayed there for, I would say, probably just about a year. It was in Grand Rapids. Then we moved back out to Martin. I don't know where we moved to when we moved back to Martin.
We went to Otsego. Bought that house in Otsego.
Oh yeah, we bought a house in Otsego. And
that's when you got a good, and you went to work in the paper mill.
Then, that's right. Then I worked at the paper mill in Otsego. We bought a house for $350. It was a 2-story. Really quite a bit of room in it, but it needed an awful lot of fixing. And being handy like we were with Dad and myself, we got it all fixed up pretty nice. And I worked in the paper mill until I got fired. And that's a long story, but I won't go into that. So anyhow, Johannes Small was the night superintendent down there, and he wanted me to go to Chicago. He was night superintendent at the Otsego paper mill, but he'd also quit his job